So it's just a few days before Valentine's Day, and the timing of this episode is somewhat relevant in that I think back to my 14-year-old self who would have loved to have predicted the future of my 8th grade crush. Well, it turns out that like my middle school self, many celebrities, politicians, and CEOs look to astrology before making any plans. They consult their astrologer before a political race, before accepting a role in a movie, or before they decide on a business acquisition. So before a financial advisor or a spouse or a therapist, these folks call their astrologers. And they don't call just any astrologer, but in many cases, they call my next guest, astrologer to the stars, Rosie Cutter. One of Cutter's clients, Dua Lipa, has been very vocal about Rosie being her astrologer and the great benefits of her as her guide. But Dua Lipa isn't the first among the rich and famous who've looked to the celestial to be their guide. JP Morgan is famous for saying that millionaires don't need astrologers, billionaires do. And Nancy Regan was famous for consulting her astrologer before all of President Regan's most important decisions. In this episode, Rosie breaks down the difference between tarot reading, palm reading, and astrology. She and I talk about how she came to this incredible career and what the stars are saying for all of us this year. I had a reading with Rosie in preparation for my conversation with her, and let me just say that it was terrifying because she was spot on about so many things happening in my life and people in my life, and I guess I'll just say that this woman really knows what she's talking about. So if you were ever curious about having a reading done or you want to know what this year has in store, this episode is for you. Rosie, so happy to see you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I had the benefit of having Rosie do a reading for me a few weeks ago, and it was so interesting. I told my husband, who's a bit of a skeptic about things like astrology, some of the things that you shared with me, and he was, kind of blown away by the accuracy of the things that you and I talked about. It's pretty mind-boggling. It's pretty incredible. So I want to talk about, because I know you do all kinds of, and in my research, I discovered the term divinatory practices, that astrology is a divinatory practice. And I think that tarot cards might also fall into that category. But so I want to kind of do a sort of an overview, right, about astrology, tarot cards, and palm readings and what they all are. Can we start with astrology? Would you kind of explain in broad terms, what is it and kind of how does it work?
Okay, wonderful. Yes, thanks so much for having me. And this is my passion and fascination. So to start with astrology, you could call astrology the philosophical interpretation of astronomy. Now, up until very recent times, doctors had to be astrologers. If you go and get a Vedic or Chinese medical consultation, they will want your birthday and they will also read your palm. And so the study of astronomy is the actual movements of the planets, the stars, the different fixed stars. There's all kinds of fun things going on up there. And it moves like a fixed clock. And that's astronomy. And astrology is the interpretation of what that means. Now, there is even astrology, for seeing when flooding is going to happen, weather predictions. This has been going on, obviously, for thousands of years. And so we think of a weather forecast and we want to know when it's going to be cold or when it's going to be snowy or when the crops are going to have rain. Well, there's also spiritual or philosophical things that can affect us under those same influences. So astrology and astronomy were one and the same. And every time you would see like the 3 priests in the Bible, the Magi's, those were astrologers. When you went to your doctor was an astrologer. So it's only in recent times, about 100 years ago, up until 100 years ago, doctors actually had to be well-versed in astrology in the Western world. So this is your traditional birth chart. People think of themselves, I'm a Scorpio, I'm a Taurus. And with this chart, it's like a snapshot of the sky and what it looked like when you were born. And now as time passes, that clock ticks along in a very predictable movement. We can look at the past, we can look at the future. And so where the sky is today You take a snapshot of that and you compare it to the snapshot of when you were born, and it makes shapes, very simple shapes, like triangles or squares. And those are interpreted as easy times, difficult times, and the quote unquote difficult times, even in astrology, would be considered things like oppositions, squares. People often fear these things when they look up and learn little bits and start reading. Well, those sort of difficult transits, quote unquote, would be the same as going skiing. Like I live here in Aspen. It's cold. It's winter. There's big cliffs. If it wasn't full of big cliffs and snow, we wouldn't get to go skiing. I'm just not going to go outside and try to act like I'm on a tropical beach and be in a bikini in the middle of the forest. That's the wrong weather. That's the wrong astrology. So astrology is the background energy, and it's what we visibly view from the sky.
So when you use the analogy of being in Aspen and this, being prepared for the snow, right? Being prepared for skiing versus being in a tropical place, was your idea there that if you get a reading that shows difficult times, you shouldn't respond to that and kind of like a woe is me. It's more, okay, difficult times, I need to have the right outfit. I need to make sure that I'm
the best time of your life.
Right.
And so around natal charts, when people will just put their little information in, and there's so much wonderful information on the internet. And for the most part, the interpretations are pretty uniform. These are things that have been around that are as old as time. We have been looking to the sun and the moon and plotting the phases to prepare and protect ourselves. But yeah, sometimes, like myself, for example, I have a very difficult chart full of oppositions, full of all these things. And when I was younger, that was scary to me. But now that I'm older, you'll see all the people in society who do powerful things. These oppositions are almost like weights, like dumbbells. If you have those oppositions, it actually allows you to become stronger. When people have tons of easy, quote unquote, natal aspects or transits, there's nothing really to push against. And the tendency is to just kind of rest on the laurels and people don't end up accomplishing much. So yes, like, is it a little bit more difficult to be at 12,000 feet in the mountain? Sure, that's a different, exciting movie, but there's a reason it's more exciting. It's lovely to go lay at the beach, but that's not the same as skiing down a Rocky Mountain cliff face. And so oftentimes I find the people who have more difficult things in their chart or are going through a difficult transit, it's actually an incredible opportunity for growth and rebirth as long as they realize what weather they're under.
I see. That makes perfect sense. So when you're talking about someone having their birth chart done, right, that is looking at the day that they were born, obviously the month that they were born, maybe the time, to sort of determine the star alignment at that moment. And then you were saying it's like the stars are moving like a clock. So you would take that direction, right? Or how that person is situated in the world based on their birth date and time. And then look at the stars with that in mind, right? If the stars are moving or the astrological chart is moving, you would read, you can give me an example, but something in, because you sent me a text today, something's happening today. It's the sun.
Yes, the sun is conjunct Jupiter today. So that's affecting the whole world, right? This is happening in the sky, affecting everyone. But so we could take that snapshot from today.
Right.
But then we would take the snapshot of your birth chart, and it's almost like laying two illustrations on top of each other, and then it makes a third picture.
Okay.
That's what the interpretation is like. So there's mundane astrology where the picture of the sky today is got a snapshot. Somebody's going to be born, with their sun in Aquarius, XYZ. However, this is affecting everyone on the world right now as we speak. And then that's how it can be interpretive or predictive, because I can look at your chart and say, oh, well, this is very favorable for your Jupiter. So I'm glad that you're doing all these interviews today because this is going to affect you in about 6 months and XYZ.
I see. But how I use the example of this, the two illustrations lying on top of each other, how my birth chart is interacting with Jupiter is different than how yours is, but Jupiter is sort of a one particular force, right? It's just, but we all kind of, depending on our birth chart, navigate that perhaps a little bit differently.
Or see it through a different lens. And people ask me this all the time, the fate versus free will. And once again, the skiing analogy, imagine there's hundreds or thousands of people going skiing today. Depending on if they're an expert, actually X Games is happening right now. So literally the best athletes in the world who can do quadruple backflips in the air are here performing. How they're going to experience their day skiing down that mountain due to their skill level, first of all. Second of all, that's going to be a totally different experience than someone who broke their leg, but they're all skiing the same mountain. You see?
Yes.
So we're interacting with what Jupiter's doing today. How it's going to hit you through your special lens is up to you. And what most people also don't realize is people identify with their sun, moon, rising. You have every sign and every house in your chart, right? Just like you have biceps and triceps, and then you have calves and shins. It's just some are more developed than others. And the art of astrology is also on a personality level to go in and say, okay, this is where I'm really strong and I tend to lean. So let me look at my weak points and actually go out of my way to make them stronger in order to be a more balanced person.
So when someone goes to an astrologist, kind of a best practice is to have your birth chart done. Right? Is that sort of the first step? And then that you would look at the context of what's happening, right now with them or in the future with them or what already has happened to them based on the astrological charts that have been and that are coming up.
100%. Yes. And people do come and have emergency questions and situations. And of course, that is wonderful that these things can be of service and give an accurate picture of what's happening right now so they can make a snap decision. But knowing ourselves and our personality is going to really help mitigate certain things that keep coming up. Why am I always in these situations where I'm giving and not receiving back? And then we can look at these different core wounds. What's also interesting about astrology is that it names things. All of these divination systems do, but astrology really will say things like, you have an eye for perfectionism and nothing is ever good enough. And they're like, well, wait a minute, that is me. And that's something that I didn't like in myself. And I've been going to therapy or doing all this self-work for years. And it's like, no, this is one really strong muscle that you have and it needs to exercise itself. So you should be doing art. You should be doing editing. You should be giving people advice so you can correct things. But we just need to work on your playful nature, your accepting nature. And the more that the critical nature has an outlet that's defined and satisfying, the less the critical nature just kind of takes over. And it's like, oh, I wish I wasn't like this. No, this is your superpower. It's just there's other parts of your chart that we should emphasize.
So it's sort of really helpful, going to an astrologer or having that done with someone who is like you, who's such an expert at it. It's really helpful also in sort of getting to understand yourself better. I mean, that's sort of the beginning of it, right? The level set.
Yeah. And also it's neutral information. Like there can go, my interpretation can hopefully be succinct and funny, but you can go look up the same things yourself that I shared with you, and you're going to get the same overall information. So there's nothing judgy about it. I mean, when we read things out of books and things are logical, it is easier for us to accept it.
Right. So tell me about tarot. How does tarot, is that just a separate practice and it's not related to astrology? Are they related?
Well, what's funny about this is one of the systems that I work with is the destiny card system. And the destiny card system and tarot have a special relationship. So there is an interesting history here. The 52 card deck, which is the cards that we play games with, we gamble with, this predates the tarot. And this is actually the basis of the Gregorian calendar that we use today. In fact, Robert Camp, who wrote the Love Card and Destiny Card books, has wonderful information showing that the 52 card deck is actually the book of the seven thunders referenced in the Bible. I have books from Egypt and China showing ancient uses of the playing cards as this divination system. Now, what happened is Napoleon himself was very into this system, and it's called the Mademoiselle Lenormand method because that was his guru, his reader was Mademoiselle Lenormand. Back in that time, no one was allowed to play with cards. You weren't allowed to play pinochle. You weren't allowed to, in Europe, it was against the law and against the church. Napoleon, engrossed and obsessed with the system, decides to let the French people start playing cards, playing games, gambling. And it insinuates the 52 card deck back into society. And that is the underlying tree of the tarot. So the tarot has the 52 card deck in it, which is the 2 of cups, is the 2 of hearts. The 5 of diamonds is the 5 of pentacles. But then the tarot has this thing called the major arcana on top of it. And that's where we think of the sun card or the death card or the tower. So the tarot has mystical, ancient history behind it that is actually unknown. We don't know where either of those come from, but it first showed up as what we consider the 52 card deck and the modern playing cards. Then Napoleon lets people, they start circulating. Then what we think of as the tarot now branches off with popularity, mostly with gypsies, palm readers, and it's still considered taboo. Even in various parts of the world right now, it's literally actually illegal. However, think about the playing cards are everywhere in society, and no one thinks about them at all as a spiritual thing, you know?
Was Napoleon going to this Madame
Mademoiselle Lenormand? Yes.
And this is, you say it so much better. It rolls off your tongue. I wouldn't roll off of mine. I took French my entire life, but I can barely order in a restaurant. But was he looking to her for guidance on making decisions?
Everything, all kinds of, and even there's a famous last spread, apparently. All of this is historically, everybody can go and check it out. It's a really fun, fascinating history. But supposedly his very last battle as well, and where he died, she warned him not to. And there's this famous spread. So there's the Lenormand method, and a lot of card readers do use that. So back to your original question, though. When people think of tarot is a little different because you're having this deck and you're really sort of asking questions. And it gets you in touch with your intuition, and it's incredible the patterns and the revelations that can come out. A good tarot reader or card reader can tell you incredible things, which is even more impressive to me because I'm looking at charts that are more like a weather forecast, and they're the same charts you can look up. And they're pretty infallible. You know, every reading is recorded. So we often look back 10 years later and it's like, oh, that came true. It just didn't come true in a way we thought because you weren't in that state of mind and you didn't know that person. So with tarot, it's a really wonderful way for people to also get in touch with their own intuition. You can even have fun with it. It doesn't have to be some heavy, stressful thing. It's more like, okay, what's this week going to be about? And then you start thinking, you shuffle the deck, and you can put out 3 cards. You know, what are you coming out of? Where are you presently? What are you going towards? And this is also working with your own psyche, working with archetypes, you know, especially when people are going through things emotionally and maybe they don't have a friend or a therapist or someone to call. This is a wonderful way for people to work things out themselves in a healthy way. But yes, its origin is unknown and mysterious. And there's many different extrapolations from all the different cultures using the 52 card deck as well as tarot to be synonym for the path of man from birth to death. There's so many interesting different things. So it really seems to be a collective archetype.
So tell me about palm reading. How does palm reading fit into this?
palm reading is that fascinating. I've got my palm reading.
I see. You've got your palms behind you. What is the...
So palm reading was my first love. I will give you some interesting factoids that are just fascinating. So first of all, when a child is born, all the lines in their palm are intact. However, the lines of your palm can change depending on health, wellness. Palm reading is also of ancient origin, very much steeped in Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine. You can tell everything about, we are a hologram. So your entire body and all your organs are present in your ear. They can do amazing acupuncture that way. It's very similar with the palm. So different mounds of your palm correspond with different elements in your body. You can see if somebody has too much heat, XYZ. The palms will also change the lines when a woman gets pregnant and has a child. She'll get a circle in her lifeline. If it's more elongated, it tends to be a girl. If it's more circular, it tends to be a boy. Here's another interesting thing. In Indian culture, but women's left palms were red, whereas for everyone else, it's your right palm. So your left palm is what you were born with, and then the right palm is the life that you've made. And you'll notice that the lines are similar, but there's quite a bit difference. Usually the right palm tends to be more clear, more auspicious. And auspicious palms, imagine the more lines that are there, the more that the nervous system can be disturbed, right? So you want to calm the nervous system. In Ayurvedic or Chinese, all of mental illnesses are based off of imbalances in our elements, too much heat, too much air, whatever the case is. So yes, women were considered to not have control over their destiny. So in Indian palm reading, they'd read the left hand, but you always read the right. And it's incredibly
You always
accurate.
read the right today. Women outside of... Is India still the left, or they do the right as well?
Probably modern places it would be the right. But if you're going and getting a full palm reading, they're going to actually look at both. But what's more accurate and what you've created is the right hand. And you've got your headline, your heart line, line of fate, line of destiny. There's children's lines. And this shows your future. And it's quite, I've received thousands of readings. In one of the articles, it talks about a palm reader told me when I was 15, oh, you've never met your mother. And I'm like, how can you know this from my palm? But there are indicators that show what has happened to you in the past or childhood. And then that's where the free will and the destiny comes in too, right? You can cling to the highest fate. You can also choose things that are not good for you and your destiny or possibly your nervous system.
Right. So which will then change the composition of your palm.
Which would change also the composition of your fate. And
right.
So there's another thing where, there's a whole thing where people even hold their hand a certain way to get money lines or children lines, or by actually creating the line.
So interesting. So take us back. How did you mentioned getting your first palm reading and having this person tell you something that you knew to be true, but there was no way for that person to know it. Obviously that made a huge impression on you because this has been your life's work. But tell us about, you started with palm reading, and then how did you get into astrology and tarot? And
I got into it. It really resonated with me. I was adopted. I was, coming out of a difficult time for myself, and a lot of the astrology palm readers, different people that we would kind of go to, and in my life, they pop up everywhere at a shopping mall or something.
Yeah.
Even they would tell me and be able to tell me these things. And so it really resonated because it had been tough. And then I was doing the palm reading in my teenage and late teenage years. And then when I was 20, I was flown to Kauai. I was doing speech therapy with autistic children. And so Kauai is like a spiritual mecca. There's all kinds of incredible spiritual people there. It's just such a powerful place. And that is where I got more introduced to my destiny card, which is one of the systems I use, which is very fast and accurate for telling people about their personalities as well as the future. And what's nice about that system is you don't need the time or the place. This woman it was giving readings outside of a health food store. And she was like, oh, it's your birthday. And I love all this sort of stuff. And I told her, and she said, oh, you're a queen of clubs. And I was like, oh, I love that. I love to hear that. And then she read me how brutal it was in the childhood, especially. And I was like, wow, that's actually really accurate. And she could see the future with this, just like with astrology. And it was this new system. And she was like, well, what are your plans after this? And I was like, well, I'm going to stay here for, 6 months and fulfill my contract. She's like, and then I'm going to go backpack around Europe. That was my dream. And she's like, no, you're not. You're going to stay here and you're going to work really hard. And which is not what I was looking to hear at the time. But I ended up getting a long-term lease in Hanalei Bay on a beautiful 4-bedroom, from the 70s surf house. And I stayed and lived in Hanalei Bay for 5 years. And I became a musician. I studied under that woman. Her name is Milana. She's incredible. I learned the Destiny card system, which in turn helped me learn more about numerology as well and astrology, which can be quite dense and complicated in the beginning. And there were all kinds of other great astrologers there. I started studying Vedic astrology and receiving readings with that, which was incredibly helpful, from Dharma, who's a wonderful meditation astrologer. Every single person I came across, I'm very obsessive, as it says in my astrology. I'd be looking them up. And then I slowly started to give readings. And then I moved to Ibiza at 26. The founder of Human Design died. My boyfriend at the time was a human design analyst, and I had just gotten into it. And he's like, we're going to Ibiza. And we moved to Ibiza.
I love this. You're like in your 20s. What is the song? I took a pill. Maybe it's I took a pill in Ibiza. And then I took a trip to Ibiza. Maybe that's a little different. But I'm sure you probably get younger people like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I'm sure you probably get people my age of 50 being like, what am I going to be when I grow up? But it's helpful, right? It's helping people learn more about themselves to either affirm what they're doing or to give them the courage or the boost to pursue something that they felt like they might have, but that they didn't really have the encouragement to do.
1,000%. I became a musician because it said in my Destiny card in astrology several times that I'd be good at it.
Do you have like one or two examples of someone coming to you and, well, we know the Napoleon example. I know Ronald Reagan and Nancy Regan used to consult their astrologer before he made decisions.
Very into the Destiny card system. Actually, Arne Leen, I have one of his famous books. He was Robert Camp's teacher. There's a whole lineage that goes down, but he was Reagan's advisor.
Well, I had my own experience, as you know, because you gave me my reading. And I, not only was I just so blown away by what you were saying based on my birth chart, sort of things that interested me or characteristics that I think that I might have, but it was really interesting too when I gave you the birth dates of my husband and my children, sort of having everything you said about them resonated with me about kind of who they are and what they're working on and what interests them. And I just think it's such a fascinating complement, right, to everything else that we do. And it's such an interesting thing for everyone to have done so they can kind of get a better understanding of themselves.
It's a beautiful gift. And, personally, I've run probably 15,000 charts. It's been 1,000 readings a year for 12 years.
Wow.
My birthday's a workaholic. We love that. So we try to find ways. But what's fascinating to me is the interdisciplinary, using several systems, how similar they all are. That is also fascinating because it's like all these archetypal systems, they're coming from the same source. And when I wake up to emails, it's been 15 years of a lot now. And if people from even 10 years ago, and they're like, hey, what you said came true. And it's not about what I said, it's about the charts. It really makes me believe in a higher power and a greater cohesion. Like I truly look at the world in a very different way now because it's been proven to me. I mean, I have the data, they have their recordings. And so it does reinforce a higher, greater good and a coherence. And we can sometimes stray from the beautiful Fibonacci spiral of our life. And there's judgment in that either. But things feel more effortless when we are aligned with the flow. Like, I'm not going to invite you to come ski in Aspen in the summer.
Right.
There's no snow. It's not the season.
Well, I'm so grateful to you for, letting me know what my seasons are. I need to get my recording. I don't know if I think you probably sent it to me, and I'm sure it's lost in my ether, because I can't wait to listen to it again, and I want to have my husband listen to it, because he's a bit of a skeptic, and as I told you, it kind of really it sort of blew him away a bit.
I just really want to stress to people that there truly is no bad energy, bad season, and there's nothing bad in you. There's nothing to even be fixed. There's just a mishmash of all kinds of personalities and elements, survival tactics that we've used to keep ourselves here in this wild and crazy, chaotic place. And we're lucky to have the crutches that we did. But once we recognize things that maybe aren't serving us anymore, we can free ourselves of the burden of that. And it can happen like that. It's happening for you every moment. Like your body heals a wound effortlessly. That is how the enlightenment and the healing is happening for the collective. This is a very intense and powerful time. We don't need charts to see and say, know that. And so I also want to urge people to exercise and be in your body as much as you can, because that is really going to help these frequencies. And also to not identify too much with everything you think and feel. If you're going through deep depression, if you're really at the low end of the wave with some of the things going on in the world, indulge in some really beautiful, sad movies, listen to some good music, but don't personalize too much of it. Sometimes we're depressed and we're like, oh, it must be my husband. It must be my job. I need to upend and change my whole life. And it's like, no, this world is suffering quite a lot right now. And you're an empathetic being, and you're feeling that because you're part of this human consciousness. And so just be gentle with yourselves, guys. This is really, truly, honestly, the time that we've been preparing for it. It's beautiful at the same time. It's like skiing black diamond cliff faces, in a blizzard. It's actually really thrilling. It's just, if we forget where we are, it can get scary. So just remember.
Is that because you mentioned earlier, what is happening in the chart for 2025?
Well,
or do you not know that yet? Is it more just month by month?
We know, and we've known for a long time. I mean, America is going through its Pluto return as a country. Every country has its Pluto return in around 248 to 250 years. When this happened in France, it was the French Revolution. There's many other.
Okay. What is a Pluto return?
It means that in any return, people are maybe familiar with the Saturn return. Any return means that the planet actually returns right to where it was in the sky when the country or the person was born.
Okay.
So it's almost like the sun takes 365 days to come around to where it was each year. Then a planet like Jupiter takes 12 years to keep coming back. Pluto is far away, takes longer. It's 250-year cycle. So Pluto is the planet of transformation, death, rebirth, oligarchs, power struggles. It's very dynamic time in someone's life, in a country's life. And so America is going through a lot of changes, the whole world as well. Seeing the aurora borealis in all of these different locations now, like more south than ever, that means that the magnetosphere of the earth is weaker. So you could think of it like the magnetosphere is like the human consciousness, the collective consciousness. And when there's things like solar flares or different spikes can happen in the Schumann resonance, that can make us really excited. And it can be either really excited or really angry and really scared. So there are changes happening on our planet. There are changes happening with the photons and the light, which is the information coming in. And then as a country, we are going through our rebirth. And think about it, France is still there. But when it had its French Revolution, the systems and structures changed greatly and violently. So I would also say that's another reason being in the body and exercise is so important, to have ways to release the anger. We don't want to have violent buildups. But yes, I think beautiful things are happening, but I think the river is moving very quickly, and the power structures and a lot of the things that we're used to, even around governmental structures, from the post office to the IRS, these things are changing. And I also think that we are being asked to move to a place of more compassion for each other and ourselves. And the last 15 or so years Pluto's been in a Capricorn. It's been a totally different movie. And now the power is going to shift. And we're seeing that in so many different ways. And so at times of great change, it's just important, to act quickly, to stake your claim. Like when you're going to ski or surf a wave, you kind of want to be on it. You don't want it jostling you around. You want to direct this wave. And B, your guys, everyone listening, the next 20 years will be magic. We will have technology. We will have medical innovations that are right out of the Jetsons and all the sci-fi movies we watch. You can also become a totally different person in a wonderful, authentic way and really attract like-minded people. And the way that people's lifestyles are is going to be able to change in a wonderful way. People having more autonomy, people finding the right tribes, the right co-opt living situations. That's all very Aquarius. But yes, there is movement. The ground is moving, and you are a spiritual being having a physical experience. I mean, we run around for the most part. I mean, I just got back from Egypt. There's a culture that was pretty focused on death and the afterlife. But for the most part, most of our cultures, we went around pretending that we're not going to die. And in fact, we do everything to avoid that fact. And it has us living in a lot of fear. And so it's like, really, there's nothing to be scared of. This is the scary place, in my opinion. This is the hard place. And that's why we want to have as much nurturing community information, whatever gets people's heads into something that's interesting, that keeps them wanting to stay on planet Earth, that keeps their mind hungry so that it's not driving them crazy. That's what matters. This is the battleground. And if you look at all of religions, if you look at their base and core, they all say this is the hard place. I mean, we're Kali Yuga. The Christians believe the devil is in control of this world. The Jewish people believe the Messiah hasn't even come back yet, and it's going to continue. We're, getting to that point. So all of them say to guard your mind. Like in the 4 agreements, he talks about how we have to be a warrior against the parasites that live in our mind and feed off of fear and negativity. And they're just there. Whether you're a good person, bad, it doesn't matter. Just like decay. Is that it's just what it is. It's not even a bad thing, but you have to be careful for mold and decay. It's not a good thing. It'll creep up on you. So I really want people to throw themselves into information, knowledge, finding like-minded communities. That's the amazing thing about Aquarius too. Somebody can be stuck in the middle of nowhere and they feel like they don't relate to anybody in their town, but they can have amazing friends online. They can listen to podcasts like this. They can go meet like-minded people. They can all of a sudden be on the other side of the world because of their communities they build. So I know it feels scary because we don't like change. But yes, I unfortunately think that the volatility is not going to slow down. And I think it's also important to have a plan and have, just for things like natural disasters even, or the fires, just have a bag, have a plan. It'll make you feel better if you do. And if it never comes to that, wonderful. But I believe we're going to see a lot of earth changes too. Like California states have charts, and California is also going through a whole Pluto thing.
Yeah.
So imagine.
So you said Capricorn was 15 years.
Of Pluto, yeah.
So 15 years. And so I'm sorry, it's been 15 years, or this is going to mark a 15-year period?
So since 2008, Pluto was in Capricorn. And when that change happened was when Pluto moves, there's big changes in society.
Okay.
So he moved into Capricorn in 2008, and now it just changed finally this past November into Aquarius. And because of the divisions of the sky, it's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. It's a little long.
So interesting. You probably could have, I'm not going to ask you if you predicted the election, but it sounds like you might have.
Yeah.
You thought there was going to be a big change.
I mean, it's really interesting. There are definitely things happening in the current president-elect's chart that make sense, and also for what's happening in this country right now. Yeah, I know. My friends are always like, we want to bet. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're like,
Tell
we got
us.
to put some money on
I've got to find out about sports
Mm-hmm.
games, the stock market. We'll take it offline. I mean, this is exciting.
Well, actually, Arlene, who was one of Reagan's astrologers, he was famous. He was on television and stuff in the 70s, and he was famous for predicting a Wimbledon tennis match that was a tie, which is even more. It's easier to see who's going to win or who's going to lose. Something being a tie is quite. But yes, he was very famous for sporting matches, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's a whole thing over there. I mean, I'm over here just trying to uplift the consciousness of humanity. If I ever get tired of that, I know I'll have a back door.
Oh my God, 100%, 100%. I mean, people pay big money to know about what's going to happen to the Super Bowl. I mean, we're almost there. Thank you so much, Rosie. It was so great to see you. I enjoyed every minute of our conversation, as I did every minute of our reading, and I hope to see you soon and have a great trip.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of The Interview. A huge thank you to Rosie Cutter for joining. And as always, thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate or review us wherever you get your podcasts. We release a new episode every Wednesday. Until next Wednesday, this is Leslie, and thank you for joining The Interview.